Peace. Welcome back to Urban X TV. We got the Black Dot in the building
Peace.
for a classic sit down. We had to get to it because there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of debates, a lot of speculation on the origins of hip hop. So we naturally had to get the author of Hip Hop Decoded in the building to break this down for us like no one else can. So, floor is yours, sir.
Peace. I want to start out by saying I am not a historian. I am a mystorian. I think there have been plenty of books and documentaries and those who can give you the history. My main focus has always been the mystery, which is how important hip-hop is to us spiritually, culturally, metaphysically, and how we can use the energy of hip-hop as a culture to move ourselves forward. I am the author, as Malcolm said, of 2 books. Hip Hop Decoded, from its ancient origins to its modern day matrix. This book has been out of print for 10 years. But we finally put it back in print based on popular, requests, and people have been requesting it. So it is now in print and will remain in print forever. My second book, Urban Culture Decoded, a critical analysis into, the thinking of a new generation, basically, is part 2 to the book, because part 1 deals with hip hop and Urban Culture Decoded deals with the environment which birthed hip hop. And that's going to be critical in this conversation because as we talk about the Caribbean influence there or there not of, we need to begin to peel back the layers to see just how deep this conversation will go. Like I said, consult your local historian to find out if this information is right for you. Online a lot lately, there's been talk that about the Caribbean influence, or that basically Caribbean started hip hop. That is false. So I wanted to add my 2 cents to it, but before I do so, I need to lay down a little bit of groundwork of who I am for those who may not know where I come from and my small contributions to hip-hop and its understanding. With that being said, I've been in the hip-hop since 1980. I made my first trip to Cedar Park in 1978. I live in walking distance from Cedar Park, which is an intricate part of the culture, at least on the west side of hip-hop, and that's where Kool Herc and the Herculoids reside. In doing so, I learned, I'm all the way back, I go all the way back to pause tapes. And pause tapes is before turntables, or should I say the poor man's way to make music without turntables. So we would put our boom box in front of our parents' record player, and we would put on the break beat, which is the get down part of the record, and we would constantly make these pause tapes, and we would come out and battle with these pause tapes. I was so poor, I've told the story before, I couldn't afford a pause tape. I had a stop button. And if you know anything about that, that means I had uneven edits, clicks in my edits, but it didn't matter because these were the first interactions with hip hop. Now, when we speak about Mama's collection of records, pop, rock, funk, blues, jazz, R&B, soul. These were in everybody's mama's collection, but inside of those collections, there was usually a 4 to 6 second piece of the record, which was an instrumental. The singers wouldn't sing, maybe they even drop the guitars, and them drums would be rocking, and that became what we call the breakbeat. So I'm going to start there and continue to give you my history. So in 1982, I went to Samuel Gompers High School in the South Bronx. That's when I was 14 years old. I really began to make a name for myself, beating on the lunchroom tables, which is what we all did. I went to school with Chris Lighty from the Violators. He managed Busta Rhymes, Missy Elliott. He managed so many people in the industry. I went to school with Coco from SWV and Tim Dog, who wrote or who dropped Fuck Compton later on from the years to come. One of the rhymes that I did, which became famous for me, was a song called Joyce. And it was a song I had heard Grandmaster Caz do a song called Yvette. And he was speaking about a girl he had banged out and this and that. Well, this was an ugly girl I had met named Joyce, and she gave me AIDS. Or I thought she gave me AIDS at the time, which wound up being something else. Now, that's significant because this is 1983, and Magic Johnson didn't even announce he had AIDS until 1991. I want to be clear to show you how advanced I was in my thinking with that song, and I actually put the song out on B-Boy Records in 1988, which is still before 1991. I put it on that album as a tribute to my true beginnings coming up in the hip-hop. I have rock jams in the park in 82 Schoolyard, which is a famous schoolyard up on University Avenue. All the legends have rocked there. In 1985, I performed at the Apollo Theater, one of the first rappers, unsigned rappers. We got Booyah, the Sandman, was about to come out, but he didn't. Also in 1985, I won Dr. Bob Lee's on WBLS Rap Against Graffiti contest for the Bronx. All right, 1985, just anti-songs against graffiti. I wasn't technically against graffiti, but it was a contest, and I wanted to show my skill set. I came in second place at the Roxy. I lost to some guy in Brooklyn. I don't know why. Don't ask. All right. Also in 1985, we put out a single, me, my man Zinc, and Ramik, called Kicking It Live. And it was remixed and produced by Paul Ogram, who produced for Curtis Blow and the Fat Boys. All right. We were also scheduled to be signed to 4th and Broadway. Zakiya 4th and Broadway before Eric B. and Rakim signed to this label. I'm only dating myself so that as I begin to get into this conversation, we know and understand that I do have a presence. I grew up with Keith Caesar, Funky 4+1, Chief Rocker, Busy B, all of these people I'm naming I know personally. Almighty KG from the Cold Crush, Tony Tone, Cold Crush Brothers, T-La Rock, first one on Def Jam, Special K, Treacherous 3, his young brother Tones, who we were competitive. We can date ourselves back mimicking the older brothers on the block. Also, there were other MCs around that time, but those were the main ones who I can reach out and touch personally and things of that nature. So, Cedar Park, very intricate part of hip-hop. We're going to talk about Kool Herc, who was of Jamaican descent. That's it. That's his Jamaican influence on hip-hop. Now, let me be clear. There are those, I saw a couple of documentaries in Brooklyn, and they saying, well, we started hip-hop and all of these things. Now, if we're talking about DJing and two turntables and massive systems, I can't deny any of that. To me, that is not the definition of hip-hop. That is one component of hip-hop. When we speak about hip-hop, we have to add graffiti. We have to add the B-boys or the breakers, the MC, the DJ, the whole component of it. Now, the reason we give Kool Herc the credit, or, for starting hip-hop or giving it its initial push, is because of something called the break beat. Now, there were DJs like DJ Hollywood, Starsky, and Pete DJ Jones, and even Disco King Mario and other DJs, and they focused on disco. Disco records and Love Is the Message, To Be Real, Good Times, all of those we considered disco records. Now, these disco records were also dope records at the time, but I heard Anthony Browder say disco was the disconnect between everything that came before it, which was the R&B, blues, jazz, and disco brought in a different energy. That Studio 54 energy, we saw the flaming energy come out, the weirdos. So disco kind of represented that era. On the other side of disco was hip-hop. Now, these disco clubs started getting real fancy where you just couldn't walk in there. You had to be clean. You had to have your suits on, and they wasn't letting the streets into these clubs. As a matter of fact, a lot of the DJs started going downtown and getting work down there and starting to fuse with those punk rock. So all of this stuff was happening at the same time. Stay with me, all right? So because we weren't allowed into those clubs, or we weren't given, the clout we deserved, out of that, a necessity appeared with DJ Kool Herc, who gave a back-to-school party August 11th, 1973. Again, I am not a historian. I am a mistorian. Contact your local historian to find out if this information is right for you, right? So it had got so jammed. And, his sister, I forget, Cynthia, I believe her name is, it had got so packed in the community center, they had to move it down the block to Cedric and Cedar, or what we know as Cedar Park. Now, with that being said, then it became this amazing event, and he started doing this on a regular basis. He had a massive, massive sound system. I have to be clear with that. This sound system could be heard 5 and 6 blocks away. It was just massive. But he was not playing Jamaican music. If he was, it was a song here or two. He was playing rock and roll music. He was playing the breakbeats. He was playing Bob James. He was playing James Brown. He was playing the Honey Drifters. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Honey Drifters in the house tonight. He was playing that type of music. I also want to be clear. The break dancers that showed up at Kool Herc's party, his jams, he did not like that. As a matter of fact, he called them boyoings because they was always bouncing up and down off the floor. Initially, he was not with the breakbeat. Or the B-boys. He thought they, because they was coming in droves. Because you got to understand, the breakbeat is considered the heartbeat. No heartbeat, no life. You know what I'm saying, Malcolm? So this breakbeat gave us something to claim as our own. And the breakbeats weren't just black breakbeats. Any song that had, rock bands, any song that had a drummer's piece on it that could be used as a breakbeat, we used it. That's the part of the record that became so important, because you sit around and you know what I'm saying, you got all this bent up energy in you, and the breakbeat gave you an opportunity to release this energy. Now this is critical because Kool Herc's system was massive, but he wasn't really that great of a DJ. He was he can get on the mic, say a few things and this and that, but his system was so massive. He knew how to add that boom, boom. So if that is a Jamaican thing, you know what I'm saying, to add the extra bass, then that's fine. We're not going to deny that. We're not going to deny Kool Herc is Jamaican and he brought that kind of, energy to it. But all the records he played were American records. Or, rock records, funk records, jazz records, anything that had the break beat in it. Now, he had 2 turntables, but in order to keep the break beat going, you got to be on time. So if he put on a break beat and the guys start breaking, and he puts on the next break, because you had to have 2 copies of every record. And, we'll get to covering up the record labels and as a part of digging in the crates and the science of that a little bit later on in what we're talking about. So these breakbeats, and because of his sound system, when he put on Apache or something like that, it really hit hard. But when he cued it to put on the next one, it was a crapshoot, whether it was going to come on time or wasn't going to come on time. This is very critical because you can't have MCs reciting rhymes if the music ain't on time.
Right.
So we'll get to that in a few. So Kool Herc's massive system is the Jamaican presence or the Caribbean presence, but the ingredients, the music being played, the people he was playing music to were of all descent. Latino brothers and sisters, black people. It just was what it was. And I have to mention that because the breakbeat or the drum is essential in all cultures. No drum, no life.
Right.
No music, no funk, no jazz. So, on the other side of town, before I go any further, I've always looked at the trilogy, and this could be my fault because I was lacking an understanding in the history, as Kool Herc, West Side, Africa Bambaataa, Bronx River, and on the east side was a kid named Flash. And Flash was a so-called geek, but he was advanced in his understanding of the mixer. So he was able to, and some people even refute this, create a switch where he could hear this turntable while this turntable was playing. So that means he could cue it up so that it was always on time. You know what I'm saying? Always on time. That's critical because his MC was Melly Mel and a few other, Kid Creole and Cowboy. You can't rhyme and do routines, which I'm going to talk about in a few, if the music ain't on time. Flash became a super showmanship. So, the three that I spoke about, and Africa Bambaataa, we always looked at as the king of records. His record collection was the most extensive out of the three. Africa Bambaataa used to sit, he had a front window, so he would play music out the window. So his cheat code was he'd be sampling new breakbeats. And if the B-boys downstairs was getting it in, okay, he knew, so that when he showed up at a particular party and put that on, he knew that was going to rock. If he put something on and it didn't rock, okay, let me hold that. And he expanded. He played calypso. He played craft works. He played a lot of funk and, you know what I'm saying? His record understanding was expansive. So he would incorporate anything if it had a dope beat to it. However, there's somebody we never speak about, and I'm going to introduce that name into the lexicon of a lot of people tonight who may not know. His name is DJ Smokey. And he had Smokey and I believe it was the Master Plan. Smokey, the Smokatrons were his dancers, and the male dancers and the Luckatrons were his female dancers. Grandmaster Flash used to carry records for Smokey. I'm going to say that again. Grandmaster Flash, the legend he is, used to dance and carry records. As a matter of fact, he didn't. I spoke to Smokey for a half hour and picked his brain recently before I sat down to do this. So if anyone has any problems with what the next couple of things I'm about to say, you got to take that up with Smokey, who's willing to sit down with Herc and all of them and have a round table discussion to get that history correct. He was kind of wiped from the history because he went into the army at some point and, people sort of forgot about him. So Grandmaster Flash would sit and watch Smokey rock these turntables back and forth. Smokey had break beats also. And he battled Herc twice. And he said Herc beat him twice, but only on sound system. Smokey said he was more of a showmanship. He was more about performing, making people dance to certain things. He said Herc's cheat code was his sound system was massive. So if he drowned you out with the sound system, those of a lower vibration would go Herc 1. But Herc wasn't one of these. And he wasn't that. He would play the record. He would talk over the record. And, he had that massive echo chamber. Cool. Herc. And the Herculoids. Lloyds. You know what I mean? And that essence, when you come to the jam in the park. Now, I want to say this as well. I was 10 years old. So back then when I went, when I went to see the park, it looked massive. When I go to see the park now, it's small. So I have to use that as a point of reference so we know, like who hurt me looked 9 feet as a kid. He's 6'4", but he looked 9 feet. Africa Bambaataa, my first experience seeing Africa Bambaataa, I was at the 9 projects on the west side, Webster Avenue, and everyone was having a good time, and he walked through, and he did like this, and he put his hand out, and the whole crowd on both sides parted ways, as if he was goddamn Moses. And I didn't say, who is that? I said, what is that? I said, hey, that's Africa Bambaataa, Zulu Nation. Ooh, my nigga, heart, boom, 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 right? So, and now when I stand next to Bam or whatever, he's not that big, but I have to say that because your reference of these things may also cloud the judgment of things.
Definitely.
This is why I'm saying I'm not a historian. I am a mistorian.
Right.
Contact your local historian to see if this information is good for you. You were going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, with that being said, Smokey and the Smokatrons would rock out. You know what I mean? I asked him about putting cardboard under the turntable so that they could spin back. And he said the reason he did it was because he said Herc had Technique turntables. He said DJ King Mario and other people, Pete DJ Jones, these guys may have had Techniques. He said he had Board of Education turntables, which means he probably stole them from out of the school or something. And they were very heavy and had these big rubbery mats on them, and you could never cue the record because what happens when you DJing, you can hold the record and the turntable will still spin forward. You know what I mean? Especially with the 1200 Techniques. But he had these turntables that didn't do that. So he had to get creative and take those rubber mats off. He said he even tried to put paper before he cut out the cardboard at the same width and shape of the turntable. But the paper and the cardboard created some electromagnetic friction. So you had to get rid of the paper, go with the cardboard, and now no matter what turntables he had, if he held the record, the cardboard would keep the turntable spinning forward. These were some of his techniques that obviously Flash was paying attention to. So when he went off to the Army, wherever he went, he said he saw Flash overseas. When Flash first put out the message on one of them records, and Flash looked like he saw a ghost. I'm saying this because when Smokey shows up, either at the Hip Hop Museum or around these legends, he's like Kaiser Sosa. Because those who know, they know. So, and I say all of that to say, when you hear these stories of amazing things that people created, did they have a reference point? They all have something. Most of us had to see somebody do something before we advanced upon it. He did say this. He said he'll take nothing from Flash's ingenuity. He said he's a bad man. So I got to throw that into it. And I also asked him about Grand Wizard Theodore, who added to the scratch. He said, all true. Theodore took, because he learned under Flash and added his own essence to become the Grand Wizard that he is. And he also spoke highly of Herc. So I want to be clear, he wasn't bad-mouthing any of these, but he said when it's time to sit down and tell the story, it's time to correct the history. So we have a lot of, with the advent of the hip-hop museum coming, you're going to find people trying to push themselves or place themselves in higher regards because it could be money involved, stature involved, and things of that nature. Shout out DJ King Mario. Shout out Pete DJ Jones. And when we start talking about MCing, you got to mention DJ Hollywood. Now, Hollywood, he rocked the disco records, but he was one of the first to call in response. Throw your hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care, say ho. All of that's DJ Hollywood. You know what I'm saying? Up my back end, around my neck. Hoo-ha! Got you all in check. That's DJ Hollywood. On tang. I don't want to go after my honey bun. Give me some of that yum before I go to bed. If I was animal, if I was an animal, I'd rather be a squirrel. So climb up on the biggest tree and do it all over the world. All of that's Hollywood. And you got to add his boy Lovebug Starsky in there. So when we start talking about rhyming over records, right now, we do know Gil Scott-Heron did poetry, and we disregard them when we say that this is a Jamaican influence.
Right.
Last Poets, Dolomite, Rudy Moore, Pigmeat Markham, who, if you go back to 1968, got the joint called Here Comes the Judge, and you cannot tell me that it's not hip-hop music before hip-hop came about.
Right.
The Golden Gate Quartet. I want you to put in Preacher's Delight when you go to YouTube. What they did was they took the instrumental from Sugar Hill, Rapper's Delight, and they played these brothers who are a gospel group doing their chant, and it sounds identical. The cadence, the style, and that's from 1937. So we got to be clear when we start talking about what part of this came from Caribbean content.
Right.
I put out a Kabbalistic tree, which I spoke about, and the 10 Sephirah taught to me by A.A. Rashid, but I superimposed the Bina, the Chokum, and all of the spiritual principles that came with it, and I put in gospel, blues, jazz, rock, scat, bebop, this, that, soul, and the last piece I put in there was hip-hop, because hip-hop is the only one that follows zero rules. You can use punk, rock, jazz, opera, anything that you can fathom, especially when it came time to sampling records. Also, I'm not going to be dealing with anything on record. This era that I'm speaking about is before records.
Okay.
And that's critical because this is the foundational aspect of it. And all of these music genres that came before hip-hop had a direct influence on hip-hop. The only difference is they were rhyming or the Last Poets over actual drums or maybe a band. We had to recreate. Grandmaster Caz of the Cold Crush Brothers says hip-hop didn't invent anything. It reinvented everything. And so we had to use the environment around us to create a new form of what we were already doing.
Right.
The four components of the four elements of hip-hop, B-boy, MC, graffiti, and the MC, DJ, are always been components of who we are. We didn't call them that. We had the drum, right? We had the oracle or the griot or the one who spoke oracally about these things. We had the dancer, the sacred dance, no matter what culture you're in. Dancing is a spiritual component. It is a way of using geometrical patterns formed by the body without using words which are of a higher frequency. Remember, talking is really like a low vibration thing. And graffiti or graph writing or hieroglyphs or writing is, another form of communication. Now, when you look at the memes of today, memes and acronyms, laughing my ass off, LM, right now, if I spray that on walls, 1,000 years from now, some generation will come along and they wouldn't know what the hell that was. Right? And that's when we start speaking about the ancient glyphs. There's people who can decode that, but they put that there to tell you what was going on in the town, in the village. So these four components, and I believe you will see memes, but they won't be on physical walls. They'll be on virtual walls. So when the next generation comes to access what it is that we did, there will come a point where they won't have to dig up actual dirt. They will just go to a database of virtual reality and they will see these memes and they will see these acronyms which have full sentences to them. You know what I mean? So these four components, in my humble opinion, is what make up hip-hop. Not just the b-boy, not just the MC. Of course, rap became the component that took off and became commercialized. But when I think of hip hop, I'm thinking alchemy. I'm thinking all of these components together. And I'm thinking the environment in which we were put in forced us to have to get creative, right? Because even when I was in the first and second grade, we had instruments in class. We had a flute, a clarinet that you could take home. And then all the poor schools got beat out, and only the kids who went to Catholic school and richer schools were able to bring their stuff home. So we were losing our ability to codify our DNA with instruments and learn the technical aspect of writing music, if that makes any sense.
Right, no, I understand that.
Right. So what did we do? We had to express, because this is rebel music, right? Hip-hop is rebel music. We were rebelling against disco and what our parents were going through. And that's why our parents did not understand for the life of them why we keep fucking up these records. What are you scratching this record for? And why do we need 2 copies of this now? And all that loud stuff you're doing, we were rebelling, right? Yeah. And so that rebelling came in the form of Kool Herc, Flash, Bam, but also DJ King Mario, Pete DJ Jones, Lovebug Starsky, DJ Hollywood, Smokey, and a lot of other ones that you never, ever heard about. All right? Now, the brothers and sisters in Brooklyn and Queens who have their claim to fame, they were playing Love Is the Message and all that, and they were too clean. They had their wallabies on and shit, and you know what I mean? And to really get down for the get down, we were on the ground, spinning and shit. We started with up rock, and then we went down for the break, and we wore fat shell top Adidas and Pumas with the big thick strings, and graffiti was a critical part of this, because graffiti became the soundtrack. Graffiti predates what we consider hip hop. You know what I mean? Not 2 turntables, but when we say hip hop, again, we're talking the break beat and what we did with the break beat, right? Once that break beat was solidified and you had those who were digging in the crates, going downtown, finding, exclusive stuff, that is a science. When you dig in the crates and then you cover up the labels so that only certain jams, you went to see certain DJs because only he had a certain record that you knew he, was going to play and things of that nature. So, with the breakbeat and the mastering of the breakbeat by Flash, then the MCs came about, right? They came about, and now you can rhyme on a record. And there was no 16 bars. It might have been, just a few bars. I want a piece of pie. The pie too sweet. I want a piece of meat. The meat too tough. It was all these nursery rhymes, and then you'd be like, so and so is in the house, and is in the house, and that was a part of your rhyme. If you got shouted out, that was some serious shit. You know what I mean? That means you had clout in the jam.
Right.
Oh, shout out so and so, so and so, so. Might have been Killers. Those are the ones who was really getting shout out Killers and shit. So and so, echo chamber. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you was on this side of the ropes, which means you was important. You was either carrying records or helping break down equipment, but that gave you status. You know what I mean? So Melly Mel is probably what Coke Rock from the Herculoids, and shout out K Slay. He got a new song out with 110 MCs on it, and it's long, but it is amazing because it covers so many different genres. No mumble rap, none of that old trap rap shit. These brothers is going at it. He got Coke Rock rhyming. I haven't heard Coke Rock say a rhyme since probably 78. You know what I mean? So he's still around, still doing his thing. So shout out K Slay for keeping that part of the culture alive. But when Melly Mel touched the mic, things was different. It was something about Mel and Cowboy. Now there's rumors of who started the word hip hop, because before that, in my book, I call it the chaos realm. Before we named it, before we gave it form, we were just doing it. And I also speak critically of the first doers versus the first receivers. The first doers, and Herc and them, they were doing.
Right.
More important were the first receivers on the other side of the rope downloading the information on how to get this shit done on their own. And most of them couldn't afford it. That's where the pause tapes came in and stuff like that. But something magical happened in 1977.
Blackout.
Exactly. The blackout in 1977 gave birth to hip-hop on a whole nother scale because DJs and them flooded them electronic stores and everybody had... Now, this shit was popping up everywhere. Everyone had a crew. Everyone could now jam in the block or do this and that. And even then, you still harnessed your craft at home.
Right.
Those first receivers received a blessing, and it was the blackout. And now people at home buying. My man, listen, the older guys on my block, shout them out. They were called the Grandmaster 7, and they were in Staten Island, because that's where Lamont lived. They lived in the Bronx, but they would go all the way to Staten Island and be DJing way before Wu-Tang Clan, way before the Force MCs. At the time, they were called the Grandmaster 7. That was Ali, that was Derek, that was Mo, that was Kevin, that was KK. And they were the older guys on my block who we would watch. Now, Ali and them had equipment, but they wasn't letting us rock.
Right.
It was my man Dave. My man Roger had a set too, but my man Dave, Moms, he was doing pretty well. Got him his own 2 turntables and mixer. And we didn't even have a place to put it. We had to put it on his ironing board. You know what I'm saying? Right. We had the DJ on his nigga's ironing board. And we had 1 crates of records and had Super Disco Breaks Volume 1 and 2. Of course, Bob James, Frisco Disco, which was a colorful record. The classics. The hip-hoppers know what I'm talking about. And that was our introduction at, 12 and 13 years old into the culture itself. Now, back then, you could have participated in all of the elements. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was a b-boy. I spun on my head. I was a graph writer. I was terrible, but I did it. I would go tag my name. Of course, I was a DJ, and I fell in love with DJing watching the Imperial JC of the Herculoids crew. And then I got to see Grand Wizard Theodore, and what he did, he was needle dropping. So while everybody else was spinning the record back to find the break, let's dance to the drummer's beat. Let's dance, dance to the drummer's beat. This thing was picking the needle up and putting the shit down exactly precisely where the break was. Dance to the drummer's beat. Dance to the drummer's beat. I had never seen anything like that in my life. So I went home to my man's house and tried to mimic it. And I did to a certain degree. I wasn't nasty at it, but I became intrigued with that. But it wasn't until I picked up the microphone that I knew, okay, this was going to be home for me. You know what I mean? And because Almighty KG was dating my man Money Ray's sister, shout out Dida and Money Ray, who passed away. When we signed the B-Boy Records in 1987, Money Ray was my DJ. The group was called Tall, Dark, and Handsome. We came out in 88. We're part of that 88 clique that came out. So show us a little respect. We didn't move a lot of records, but it really wasn't about that at the time. We want to big up DJ Red Alert. He played us 3 or 4 months straight. And we were elated by that because we just wanted to be recognized by the pioneers and the peers. And when T. La Rock came up to me and said, okay, I see you, young blood, that meant more to me than anything else. This is T. La Rock.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and then what we didn't know at the time, KRS-One was on that label. We did Criminal Minded on that label. He was getting off the label because of all of the bullshit on the label, which we didn't know about. So when he left and went to Jive and came out with that line, B-Boy Records, you just can't trust. Making funky music is a must. I'm #1. And at that point, KRS-One was that dude. He still is. So a lot of DJs, when they saw my label and saw B-Boy Records, they wouldn't play that shit. And I didn't take that personal because I understood. But we were already under contract with Bill Camara, Jack, and they had a Jewish guy up there and stuff. And they were into porn and a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know about at the time. So I say all of that to say I got my hands on a lot of Cold Crush tapes early. Even as a shorty, niggas, the older dudes on the block was fascinated, show you how you get this tape. But they didn't know how to plug.
Right.
You know what I mean? I traded rhymes. This is how far back I go. You give me your rhyme, I give you mine, but we kept each other's rhyme.
Right.
So now I got 2 rhymes and you got 2. You know, all these little things and nuances about the culture. But now I want to speak about, when we talk about the B-boys, there's no Caribbean influence there whatsoever. That came straight out of the Bronx, right? And salsa music is funny. Salsa music was being invented or perfected at the same time. And you know, the Puerto Ricans are very proud. They wanted their children to follow in their footsteps and deal with the salsa music, you know, the congos and this and that. The way they rebelled against their parents was going into hip hop. So this is why we have a Latino influence in hip hop. You know, with DJ Charlie Chase.
People not gonna like that.
Yeah, they're not gonna like it. I don't give a fuck. Take it up with hip hop. I'm telling you what I saw with my own goddamn eyes. I'm not giving you. If you ain't been to Cedar Park or Bronx River or the 9 Projects or Eden Wall Project, don't at me. Now, if you've been there and you can teach me some things, I'm all with it. But all this speculative shit from somewhere else, you know. So I'm telling you what I know. I'm not telling you what somebody told me or read in a book. So we got Charlie Chase. We got DJ Disco Wiz. He was Puerto Rican. Peso from the Fearless 4. Prince Whipper Whip. Grandmaster Furious 5. I'm sorry, Fantastic 5. Funkmaster Wizzy Wiz, Undefeated 3. Prince Marky D, Fat Boys. Spanish. And most of the Spanish brothers were into the b-boy.
Right.
They seemed to come from that tribe, and they clicked with the graffiti and the b-boy. But their presence, Crazy Legs, Pabon, you know, all of the Jimmy Lee, and all of the Spanish brothers who just found a home there, but they were a part of the culture. Now we called it culture because Africa Bambaataa was the one who accepted all of the components. He's the one who probably gave it the name, the elements of hip hop. So the breakbeat became the soundtrack for the graph writers who were on trains, you know, and they were listening to these tapes and doing, you know what I mean? The b-boys, of course, they needed the breakbeat so they can get off. The MCs needed the breakbeat so they can recite their rhymes. And our first crew, you know, it was a bunch of crews that came out. A lot of them, names don't get mentioned, but the ones that directly affected me, Funky 4+1, you know what I'm saying? Because Keith Keith lived on my block. Of course, the Cold Crush. Of course, the Treacherous 3. Fantastic 5. That was Grand Wizard Theodore's crew. Mastodon and the Death Committee, Zulu Nation, Kool Herc and the Herculoids. You know, these were all the crews that affected, and I was directly affected by, and they all played a role in this culture. You know what I mean? But this all, if you want to go on a tree of life and trickle down, came from gospel music, came from scat. It came from playing the dozens in terms of the rhyming,
right.
And rhyming on tempo. And then the ones who started mastering routines, like the Cold Crush, are considered the greatest hip hop group of all time. Before Wax, right? The greatest. Their showmanship, Grandmaster Caz, and they were structured almost like an R&B group. You had Almighty KG on the end, the baritone, the big deep voice. On this end, you had Grandmaster Caz, the so-called lead MC, JDL, who was the wild one. You had Easy AD. The ladies loved Easy AD. And Money Ray, my DJ, you know, from Tall, Dark, and Handsome, him and Henry were the dancers. And, you know, so you had this component, and they would do these routines off of commercials, off of, you know, songs that they heard before in the past. And they would craft these routines that were amazing. They had 2 DJs, DJ Tony Tone and the Puerto Rican DJ Charlie Chase. So that's how hip-hop began to evolve. Fantastic 5, Furious 5, Scorpio, Raheem, Melly Mel, Scorpion, Kid Creole, Cowboy, Fantastic, Whip, Ruby D, Dada Rock. You had all these groups, and they would battle each other. Fantastic Five took out Cold Crush in one of them battles, and Legendary has it. But there was no Jamaican influence. I didn't hear Jamaican in a record until Karis One said, "The bridge is over, the bridge is over, bye-bye. The bridge is over, biddy-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-day. All you sucker MCs want to please come out to play." That's the first anything Jamaican I heard on a record. Now, of course, I am not a historian. I am a mystorian. Contact your local historian to find out if this is good for you. So there could be some, because I'm only 53, right? So there are those who are 63 who have a more clearer understanding because they were older. I have to respect all of that. I'm down to be taught, period. But I'm telling you what I've seen with my own eyes. I'm not giving you secondhand and thirdhand. The secondhand information I gave you was from Smokey.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Take that up with Smokey. You know what I mean? Who's willing? He want all the smoke. How about that? So, you know what I mean? There was no Jamaican influence or Caribbean except the fact that these three people in particular were of Jamaican descent. That's like me being American going to Jamaica. And when I get there, they already fostering some style, but I got the dopest sound system out to help, blow that shit and take it further. And then 30 years later, they say I created the shit.
Right.
That is a goddamn lie. I did not create it. I was a part of something that was already in the soil.
So why do you think? I feel like it's more like a human nature thing. Like our first like instinct is tribalism. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like no matter what we're talking about, we always want to belong to a tribe. So now it's Caribbeans created hip hop. Well, before it's always something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's one of them things, and maybe that's just human nature.
Yeah.
And now revisited history, because I even heard Busta Rhymes. I think he was on the Drink Champs or one of them shows say the same shit. Like, Caribbeans started hip hop. And I'm like, Busta, that's not true. Yeah, Herc was Jamaican, but it ain't like he was bringing in Jamaican chants and we now all of a sudden we all doing Jamaican music. No, we were doing hip hop.
Right.
And I give him credit for the breakbeat.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now I understand Smokey was also using breakbeats, and some people were saying Disco King Mario, he was using some breakbeats too. The breakbeat became the pulse. It was different.
Right.
So we were able to separate ourselves from disco, blues, jazz, and then my DJ to this day, DJ Lou Breakbeat Flores. I have to mention him when I mention the Puerto Ricans and their contributions to hip hop. He's been my DJ since 1982. He's been DJing since 77. He created the ultimate breaks and beats. It's 19, 20 volumes of them records. Lou Breakbeat Flores. Now, why is that critical? That's critical because there's something sacred, and he got a lot of flack from a lot of the elder DJs because they felt that he was putting a hack in when now DJs didn't have to go and dig in the crates and search for these particular breaks on their own as a part of their initiation.
Right.
And I get that. But we would have no Pete Rock. We'd have no DJ Premier. We'd have no Large Professor, at least in that capacity. Easy Mo B. All of these people, Dr. Dre, all of these people benefited from the compilation of breakbeats, because if you was in another city and didn't have a Downstairs Records or a Beat Street or something like that, or knew nothing about the concept of digging in the crates, he just made it available. And another reason that became critical is because sampling was just coming on the scene.
Right. Prior
Prior to that, everything was played on a drum machine. My first single, Kicking It Live, like I said, Paul Ogram, who produced for the Fat Boys, the scratches in there are mechanical scratches from off a keyboard. Oh. You can tell they're not really scratches because they didn't have a way, even at that time, to incorporate that stuff. So sampling, and I guess Marley Marl would impeach the president, being able to chop the beats up on a 1200 drum machine created a whole new facet. And all of those DJs, Premier, all of them collected the break beats, and now those funky records were now being chopped and screwed in a different kind of way to make what hip-hop became in the 80s. So from the 80s on up, let me also add Ultramagnetic MCs. What his name is, Seji, was a master on this goddamn machine. Now this machine only gave you, I think, 8 seconds of sample time. So you had to find unique ways. And now remember, this is an extension of the drum.
Right.
This is an extension of your heartbeat, which is the first drum. Right? So at the pace in which any drum is played, your actual drum beat will calibrate with that drum, and if the drums is going faster, your heart will be racing. This is why certain jams that went on, when they put a certain jam on, a shootout could break out, because the energy represented by that drum. Then we had the physical drum, but we don't have time to climb a tree, cut down some wood, grab some pig skin or cow skin and really make your own, because you had to make your drum. Right? So each environment, the drum was banned on slave plantations because they figured out we was fucking talking to each other with the drum. And then uprisings would take place, and they was always surrounded around this fucking drum. So now y'all can't have this fucking drum, right? So then, of course, there was actual drums, and every paradigm shift, the drum took on a different meaning, even down to beating on the lunchroom table when we didn't have nothing else. You know what I'm saying? Or beating in the pissy hallway. Somebody got to hold that rhythm so that the MCs can get off. And then you have Dougie Fresh, who became a human beatbox.
Right.
Him and the guy from the Fat Boys. His name escapes me. I've forgotten more about hip-hop than most people will remember. And I'm not bragging. I'm just simply saying, when you've been in it for as long as I have, and there's who've been in it longer, I don't remember all the intricate details the way I used to, because this is ever expansive. So if you're going to correct me in the chat, please do, because I like that kind of stuff, because I go, oh yeah, Buffy from the Fat Boys. You know what I mean? So then came along a mechanical drum machine like a Linn drum that had preset drums in there. You know what I'm saying? Do. Side note, Flash was the first person I ever heard rock a drum machine. Flash is on the beatbox going, do. He actually had a goddamn drum machine at the jam. You know what I mean? And when he would, first of all, he would scratch with his ass. He was so fast on the ones and twos. He began to perfect that shit, right? There's a good video out on YouTube of Flash breaking down the torque and how many times you need to turn. This shit is heavy science.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm almost thinking he read my book or some shit, right? But anyway, he would come out with a beatbox and start rocking the actual beatbox at the jam. Amazing shit. So the first drum machines were these mechanical preset drums, and then somebody thought of a sampler. Emu, thought about putting out a sampler, and they just pretty much gave that shit to us. The spiritual essence of who we are, we infused what we knew into that machine and brought that shit to life, where that shit could sound like a 40-piece orchestra, all depending on who the composer was. Right? They do these things because they know it is natural and instinctive for us to figure the shit out. I'm pretty sure said they didn't even need a fucking manual. Once you get the basics down, and that's the spiritual essence of who we are, interfacing with material, but turning the material into a living thing, right? One of the secrets, and I don't know if other producers use it, my DJ, Lou Breakbeat Flores, found out how to get damn near unlimited time on the shit because he would sample everything fast. He would put the record on 78 and sample it fast and then slow the shit down. So now instead of having 8 seconds, he'd have 8 15 seconds, 20, whatever he needed. And that's one of the hacks that he would use. And they don't teach you that in the manual because they don't expect you to figure that shit out.
Right.
And then, of course, came the MPCs and other drum machine. But those break beats enabled a DJ or who wanted to transition into a producer to sample a bass, a snare, a hi-hat, a trumpet. And that's when hip-hop began to really open up, where people in other places started doing music. So the Legends was mad at Lou, but the next generation loved it because they would just go get all the break beats. And in fact, one of the break beats used by Rob Bass, "It Takes Two to Make a Thing Go Right." Lou told me he made a mistake in the editing in that record, and he could hear that shit in Rob Bass song. So he know Rob Bass and them took that shit straight from the breakbeats. They didn't get the original record; it came from the breakbeats itself. But only he knows that the edit ain't there, or you know what I mean. And at one point, because I was listening to an interview, shout out Young Guru who mixes and produces for Jay-Z, real good dude. He was interviewing Lou, and he said at one point on the Billboard charts, the top 20 songs all had breakbeats in them.
Wow.
You know what I mean? To show you these breakbeats, the importance of them.
That's dope.
None of those breakbeats had Caribbean music in it. I'm just, as we talk about the Caribbean effect in hip hop, none of them shits. You know what I mean?
Right.
None of them songs had any Caribbean anything in them. They were rock records, breakbeats, soul records. James Brown, of course, heavy. So that's the true influence as we begin to understand. And it was rebel music. We were rebelling against that. The graffiti writers was putting up messages. Koch sucks. We need jobs. They were putting up all kind of messages on these canvases with the trains.
Right.
And, that's a whole nother aspect of it that has no Jamaican influence or Caribbean influence. There were no trains in Jamaica, from what I understand. You know what I mean? I've been to Jamaica. I didn't see no trains, especially in the 70s, right? So when we start talking Caribbean influence, the only thing I can say is the actual drum, which is not just Caribbean, it's Cuban, it's African, it's everything.
Right.
It's the drum. But the break beat and how it was suspended with two turntables, that's all American music. You know what I'm saying? How brothers started rhyming and telling these story rhymes, that was all American music, which came from Playing the Dozens, which came from Dolomite, which came from Gil Scott-Heron, which came from The Last Poets, which came from Pigmeat Markham, which came from the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It's just that we were the first to do it with two turntables, and you got to thank DJ Hollywood for doing it disco wise. You know what I'm saying? Because he'd be like, "Yo, this is DJ Hollywood about one time. Get on the mic to have some good times," and he would play the record. Good time. Throw your hands in there. Come on, we're gonna get on down. And then he would begin to do these little small rhymes, small. But the composition of rhymes, still talking the 70s, it began to evolve. Chief Rocker Busy Bee, who I call the greatest entertainer of all time, because his mastering of call and response. Throw your hands in the air. Come on now, we're going to get on down. What sign? You Virgo. No, are you Scorpio? So you had your call and response. You know what I'm saying? If you got more than $5 in your pocket, you know what I'm saying? So we had that essence. That ain't Jamaican, or he didn't get that from Jamaica.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that they weren't chanting. I'm not disrespecting Caribbean culture, because I remember in the 80s when Yellow Man and all of them became real prominent here, and that too is rebel music. It was rebel from their perspective based on the soil and what they were fighting against. Babylon. The first time I heard the term Babylon was them talking about the police out there and the injustices, and we all knew about Bob Marley. So we want to put Bob Marley like here. But that wasn't like a chant thing. That became sort of like rap.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yellow Man, Bounty Killer, and all of them guys came about doing a Jamaican style, but that wasn't in the 70s, not in the Bronx.
Right.
So when we begin to talk about the origins of it, Jamaican, Kool Herc, Jamaican Flash, Jamaican Bambaataa, but they all were playing American music and using American culture to do so. So I think it's very important that we clear that up. Again, I'm not a historian. I'm a mistorian. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So that's my piece to the story in hopes that it helps somebody begin to understand what we're talking about. This was our thing. And we was using this to rebel against everything else. We were using that dance at the end of that week on that Saturday when you went to that jam and you had so much bent up pressure because you didn't have a job or you didn't know where your next meal was going to come from, but you went to the jam in the park and you could feel good and release something with a dance. You know what I mean? A get down and you know what I'm saying? Bah, 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 bah. And I stopped b-boying once I started wearing British Walkers, because I didn't want to fuck my shoes up and, they wore Wallabies in Brooklyn and other places. We wore British Walkers, Playboys, Hush Puppies. And, we had the AJs, the overlaps, the mock necks. And the mock neck, I used to tell you, they used to pull your shit and count to 10 seconds. If your shit didn't snap back, it's a fake-ass mock neck, nigga. And I had the fake mock neck. So, I've been, come on, son. Older dudes on the block. I'm like, come on, son. Because I knew my shit was fake. I couldn't afford the real fucking mock necks and shit. We would ride around in OJs. That's when, just get in the car and they would play the latest Cold Crush tape and you pay $2 or $3 and you just ride around. Of course, you try to go around where the girls are. And be like, oh, look at little, Wayne in them. And we couldn't afford it except on like Easter or something. You little young niggas. We all get together, put our money, get an OJ, nigga. Let's get an OJ. You know what I mean? So these are the essences of the culture, and there was no Caribbean influence. Not in the music, not in the dance, not in the art, not in the words being spoken. And those are the four basic elements of hip-hop right there. You know what I mean? But I will say our Latino brothers was there. And there's probably other Jamaicans there, but they were participating in an American culture.
Right.
They weren't, and until the 80s. Just from my perspective, the 80s is when I started getting more of a Jamaican influence, but the train was already on the track.
Right.
The music was already what it was.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like I said, again, this is before records. When Sugar Hill Gang came out with Rapper's Delight, that changed the ball game because now, first of all, we didn't like it because it was trash to us.
Right.
Because we were conditioned to hear the real MCs do it. We did hear the CASN, the OEVA. We thought that was Grandmaster Caz on that shit, but we didn't like it. But it was a very important record. A lot of people loved it, and it became what it became. But at the time, we did not like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So with that being said, these are my stories. These are my chronicles. This is the Black Dot. These are my chronicles. This is my story. And I'm sticking to it. You can get this book on the 29th of July. This book is already out.
They're both on Amazon.
They're both on
Hip Hop
Amazon.
Decoded, you can pre-order now.
Hip Hop Decoded, you can pre-order now. Any questions?
No, I think you covered it all.
Okay, I'm trying my best. Let me look on my list and see if I forgot anything.
I think you covered it all from my end.
Okay. And there were many, like I said, other places had everybody had their Kool Herc.
Right.
Let's just put it like that. LA had their Kool Herc. This one, everybody had a DJ who for the first time they heard or saw something, two turntables spinning and the DJ doing something, and that DJ represents that. But we know the hub of this was the Bronx. We don't want to you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have to be clear about hip hop, not who was the first DJ, because DJ might have started anywhere.
Right.
Who started hip hop? And that's all of the components together. You know what I'm saying? Making it a culture, making it a way of life that you still use today. If you in any kind of art, If you a spoken word, a rapper, a singer, that's the spoken word element or the throat chakra element. If you are a graphics designer, you may paint now. The canvases may be in virtual on your computer, but if you're an artist, and even if you're doing sketches, that's a form of graffiti.
Right.
If you are a classical dancer, any kind of b-boy dance, if you're going, that's the b-boy, b-girl element aspect of it. And the DJ is now morphed into the producer, the one who, you know what I'm saying, creates their own rhythms. So when we speak about hip-hop as a culture, it is a way, these things for us are a way of life. You know, we don't operate without being able to drink, party, dance, write, or create. And a creator is in all of us. And you need to find out which one of the quadrants resonate more with you. And we say the fifth element is spirit itself. It's the ethers. It's your interaction with all of these things that make these things relevant. Of course, in Hip Hop Decoded, I got into some advanced metaphysics and called it earth, air, fire, water, and ether to show you that these are the components that make about life. And we became urban alchemists. And in that urban alchemy, we looked around at us the same way motherfuckers was cooking up coke. Who thinks of that?
Right.
Who thinks to cook up coke rock and survive? We cooked up hip hop in a way. It was the bits and pieces and parts that perhaps either nobody wanted or we were left for dead. And we started plugging into the light pole. We got them two turntables. We put them goddamn nickels on them turntables, so even when the wind blew, the fucking needles stayed down. We put them little lights out. We blew fans. We did all of these things to create an environment to bring people an opportunity to release from what they was going through. But hip-hop at its core is rebel music. Hip-hop at its core is African American. Hip-hop at its core is that urban music that was created out of the trenches of the South Bronx due to necessity. Them taking out all the music classes and all of that, and we got cardboard and we put it down and we danced, and we saw that train going by and said, I want to be known in the Bronx and in fucking Brooklyn. So watch this shit. And the niggas in Brooklyn was like, bet. We want to be known in Brooklyn and the Bronx, so we're going to put a piece up. So when that train come up here, what? And it became a movement on itself. And the best MCs, Grandmaster Caz, Kumo D, Melly Mel, Almighty KG, Treacherous 3, all of these MCs began to lay the foundation so that Run DMC and everything that came after them would have a blueprint. So I'm so glad that a museum is being built in their honor. And we thank them for being the ones who helped foster in what was already inside of us. Because hip-hop is nothing new. This vibration of hip-hop, and we give Kool Herc credit for being the one who fostered that breakbeat, or one of the ones who fostered the breakbeat and had such an enormous sound system that you can hear 7 blocks away, that became the call for young people, b-boys and graph writers and everybody who wanted to be somebody came, and we sat at the ropes and we watched Herc do what the fuck Herc did. You know what I'm saying? And as a result, somebody called it hip hop and it gave it form. And the minute you give something form, it starts to die. I'm not going to get into all of that right now. So again, with that being said, this is the Black Dot. These are my chronicles. This is my story, and I'm sticking to it. I am not a historian. I am a mystorian. Please check your local historian to find out if this information delivered here is right for you.
Peace.
Peace.